Hello. Do you want to play a game?
Be food and drink and ghosts, and perhaps even a few murders. You're all invited.
Hello and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we combine alcohol and horror for your entertainment. Starting today, we are going to be making a drinking game for everything in the Evil Dead filmography in preparation for Evil Dead Rise. In saying that, we have already released 2 alcoholic beverages inspired by Evil Dead, so make sure to give those a look as well.
Today, we are starting where it all began with The Evil Dead, made in 1981, written and directed by Sam Raimi, whose claim to fame came from this movie and the sequels that it has spawned. Besides the first 3 Evil Dead movies and the TV series, Sam Raimi is also known for directing Drag Me to Hell and a few superhero movies, including the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies and the second Doctor Strange movie.
The Evil Dead has an extremely generic horror movie plot. A group of friends go into the wood, find a mysterious book, and after a few passages are read from the book, they start getting picked off one by one. However, what sets The Evil Dead apart from other horror movies with similar plots is the creatures they face, being the Deadites, and the willingness to go over the top with the gore in the movie.
Just a bit of a forewarning, the drinking rules themselves do contain mild spoilers, but nothing that'll really take you out of the movie if you haven't seen this one yet. With that being said, let's go on to the drinking rules.
Again, first rule as always is death. For this movie, it came to a total of 5.
Yeah, and some of the deaths can be pretty gruesome. In saying that, though, the movie had a pretty poor budget. I think it was only $300,000 back in 1981, so it would have been a little bit more nowadays, but that being said, it's still not a lot to work with, so you can see that in some of the special effects, but the deaths are still very gruesome and quite bloody a lot of the times.
Yeah. I guess there's a few things to mention. Deadite deaths and human deaths are kind of a gray line. In saying that, whenever a human turns into a Deadite, we don't consider that a death. Some people do. But if you want to, that's fine. We're not, though. That's why we got a total of 5.
But if a Deadite gets, chopped up into pieces, we're counting that as a death.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be in human form where they die. If they're as a Deadite, it still counts as a death after they're dead.
Yeah. I think there was one instance where we technically included it because I believe somebody died and then came back as a Deadite.
Yes.
So that is an exception because there was a clear death and then Deadite.
Yeah. One thing that I want to point out about this movie, and it kind of just goes to show with the budget, what like we talked about, is in some of the Deadite deaths, it almost looked like a creamy corn or oatmeal or something spewing out of their limbs at some points. And just to show you about how they kind of worked within their budget, they literally used milk.
It was just milk?
Just milk.
Just milk.
Spewing out of their dismembered limbs and whatever. And, I mean, it looked gross with all the blood and stuff mixed into it, but you're like, why is there this white creamy substance coming out of them? It was just kind of weird and unsettling, and I think that was what they were going for too. Anyways, enough about that. Let's move on to rule number 2. As always, it's screams, cries, and yells. If you hear one, you take a sip. And this gave us a total of 23 sips.
In saying that, I think it was fairly more frequently than most horror movies anyways. I know the average is probably just low of 20. Or just short of 20, rather.
Yeah, it's probably like a high average, maybe slightly above, but it's a pretty good chunk, to say the least.
Definitely. Anyways, let's move on to the next rule, which is whenever a body part is dismembered, and that only came to a total of 6 sips.
Yeah, we kind of expected it to be more, to be honest. It's you almost associate people getting limbs chopped off with Evil Dead, but I guess in the first one it was only 6, and one of those scenes was even mercied, so 5 of those alone came from one scene.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it isn't a common occurrence, to say the least.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of the things you consider with Evil Dead, just for the main fact that it's one of the ways to kill the Deadites is dismemberment.
Dismemberment is specifically chopping their head off. I don't know if that came later in the series or the franchise, but it's definitely the easiest way to kill them.
Yeah, it all kind of went together.
Yeah. But let's move on to the next rule. Rule number 4 is whenever you see a Deadite or somebody's turning into a Deadite, they kind of go hand in hand, but it gave us 15 sips in this film.
Yeah, and I guess it's worth mentioning at this point that I really like the stop motion of how people turn into Deadites. I know whose ankle was it? It was, I don't think it was Linda, but it was one of the friends.
Yeah.
How it kind of spirals out like a disgusting looking spider web of veins
Right,
almost.
yeah.
That was probably one of my favorite use of stop motion,
Oh, yeah.
honestly, ever.
Yeah, it was pretty effective, to say the least.
However, let's move on to the halfway point, which is whenever you see a shot of the cabin. And that came to a total of 10 sips.
Yeah, it kind of just sets that atmosphere up. It gives you a little bit of a spooky vibe with the moons in the background, and it's clearly a fake moon. It's it's huge, but it kind of just helps set up the atmosphere. And another thing that helps set up the atmosphere is our next rule, which is rule number 6, whenever you see fog. And this gave us a total of 18 sips.
Whenever you saw the moon, as you were saying, it kind of went with a cabin shot, you saw a little bit of fog just kind of move across the moon.
Oh, yeah.
And it always just made me think that it looks like somebody's vaping, as opposed to just a fog machine.
Oh, yeah.
It just looks like the Deadites are vaping in the woods. That's the vibes that I got from this movie, to be honest.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, even in the shots where it's like without the moon or whatever, just shots in the forest, there's an excessive amount of fog. Like, they go crazy with the fog in this.
Oh, yeah. I think even when they not break open the door, but rather enter the house for the first time, there's fog in the house too.
Yeah. And I think it just helps cover up some of the imperfections too, with the low budget like we talked about.
Moving on to rule number 7 is whenever there's a first-person POV shot, and this came to a total of 17 sips.
Yeah, and like there's a couple different camera shots that we could have included as rules. Like we could have done close-ups on somebody. There's a lot of those, or even like a Dutch angle.
Yeah, they used a few of those for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So we've decided to just keep it simple. POV shot. It happens a lot with 17, like we said. So we just wanted to keep it simple with one camera shot and just keep it at that.
Yeah, it's kind of the thing for many, I guess, horror icons such as Michael Myers as well. So I guess it's kind of necessary in saying that, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's worth mentioning, there was one scene where we did decide to mercy it just because it kept cutting back and forth so frequently.
Yeah, that was at the very beginning, I believe.
Yeah.
Because they were on their way to the cabin and they were talking, and I think it was just the rate is what we decided, just because they'd be talking for about 20 seconds and they would go back to pretty much the same POV shot.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at that point it's just kind of up to your own discretion, so take our numbers with a grain of salt, as always, though, that our numbers will never be exactly the same. But let's move on to rule number 8. It's whenever you hear "join us" being said, and this happens 16 times in this movie.
That is a lot more than I remember.
Yeah,
I'm just going to say that right now.
It happens a lot.
It is a little bit unsettling as well.
Yeah.
A little bit of a whisper. It kind of adds into the element of, I guess, eeriness, the whole cabin being isolated. It was a neat little touch, I'd say.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The second to last rule we have is whenever the cellar door is open or somebody tries to open it. And that came to a total of 11 sips.
Yeah, we actually get to see down into the cellar door and go downstairs in a single scene. But they leave a lot of it up to the imagination of what could be down there, because you don't actually get to see the full basement or anything. You kind of just get to see down there. But for the most part, it's a Deadite is locked down there trying to escape, basically. And that's where most of these drinks come from, with the exception of, I think, in the beginning when we see down there.
Oh, exactly.
But anyways, let's move on to the final rule of this drinking game. Rule number 10, it's whenever you see the magnifying glass necklace, and this gave us 6 sips.
It wasn't a lot of sips, but I feel like it was important through the plot, especially trying to show humanity towards some of the characters, such as Ash.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also nice to just have an easy rule to help balance out the total amount of sips, right? Like, you don't want to have every rule just crushing you the whole movie. So this one, it stands out when it happens. It's few and far between. I think maybe in the beginning you see it more, or the end, one or the other. But it is few and far between, so it stands out when it happens, especially.
It's a lot of beginning and end, I'd say.
Yeah, maybe that. Yeah, exactly.
A little bit of both.
A few of each, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, that does it for the drinking rules. The total came to 127 sips, which came out to just over 4 drinks per standard 12-ounce can.
So yeah, 127 sips. It's a pretty good number, I'd say. I think it falls in that sweet spot where it's not too hard, not too easy, but it gives you a good amount of sips throughout the whole movie, right?
Yeah. I guess I don't think we mentioned, if this is your first time viewing, it's based on a 30 sip per can scale. that's just our measurement. You can go at your own pace. That's definitely recommended because 4 drinks and I think it's an 80-minute movie is pretty quick. So again, especially if you're not a seasoned drinker, slow it down because you might have a risk of throwing up or anything like that. So definitely take it slow. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, take it slow and don't take huge sips. Like when we say sip, we mean sip. Just like, and that's it. And that's why it's 30 per can.
Yeah.
So
some people do a full ounce and that
you're insane if you do that.
It's pushing it a little bit.
You're going to die if you do that for any of our drinking games.
Yeah, definitely. So we don't recommend doing it like that. Especially there's some rules or some scenes in general that are basically just a straight can if you play it like that. And I think that's just a bad way of playing it.
Absolutely.
Anyways, the difficulty of the drinking game, pretty strong. Scream, cries, and yells were, I'd say, more than I thought. Same with Join Us.
Join Us, and even fog. There was a lot of fog. There was quite a few rules that were good amount of sips, actually. But nothing that went too overboard, nothing that hit us way too hard or anything like that. It was just a nice, kind of difficult drinking game, but not too difficult in my eyes. But with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our drinking game on The Evil Dead. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below.
Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more Evil Dead content coming your way. Of course, that's going to be Evil Dead 2 coming out pretty shortly here. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. And this is us saying,
Cheers to fears.
Fears.